Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Nick Saban Show presented by Alpha Insurance. I'm Chris Stewart, filling in again for Eli Gold. Great to have Mark Schlabach of ESPN and ESPN.com joining us as our media guest from CB&S Bank. And the man himself has arrived. Coach Nick Saban, great to see you as always, sir.
Well, good to be here. Happy to see everybody here tonight. I appreciate the support.
Great to have him here indeed, and a guy you know pretty well in Mark, having him in town.
Yeah.
A couple of days. Mark,
respect what he does. He does a great job.
Mark, we like to let.
First time I've heard that.
I understand. We we like to let.
We haven't been hearing that lately either.
Wow. Tough.
We like to let you get the first question for Coach.
We met earlier today. Just, Coach, how do you get your team to bounce back? Big game on the road this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think, we look for things to build on, not really for things to, tear down. Got to create winning habits. Got to be able to play with discipline, not give in. There's no part-time in success. There's no tentative commitments. Everybody's got to be all in, and you're not really sacrificing. You're really making an investment, in your future. You're making an investment in the team. You're making an investment in the legacy of what you can accomplish, because, this team's going to kind of get remembered by how they finish. Now, everybody always talks about how do you finish, and, we're disappointed that we lost 2 games on the last play of the game by a total of 4 points. But, every adversity has an opportunity. And I think that, one of the things that the players need to understand is their character will be judged probably more based on how they respond, to the adversity that we've had to this point, as the adversity itself, which and I take full responsibility for, the things that we didn't do that created some of that. But at the same time, we look forward to seeing how we respond. I think one of the things that I'm trying to get our players to understand is, you've heard me talk before about how you got to respect winning. Well, really what you're saying is you got to respect the things you have to do to win. Like what's important now, and that what's important now comes up every day in terms of, what you do, how you do it, the habits that you create, and all those types of things. But, when you go play and everybody storms the field, when you get beat, that means that you walked into a place where everybody's taking it personal. Everybody's taking it personal to beat you. And that's because of, what's been created here from a reputation standpoint or whatever, and the success that we've had through the years. But I don't know that our players always understand that, because if you don't take it personal, you're not going to be ready for that challenge. And that's something that we've, struggled with a little bit on the road, and we'll have the same kind of challenge this week. And I hope our players understand that, this will be personal for them. So if you don't make it personal for you, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
Coach, what did you see that you liked from your team in that ballgame? We talked some after the game about it.
Yeah, well, our guys play hard in the game. They played hard. They compete hard. They play hard. They play with a lot of toughness. They show tenacity in games to come back in games. And the thing that, we need to improve on is we have to play smart. And, you heard me talk before about, we all have shit moments in our life, where something happens and you say, shit. Well, that happens in a game too, you fumble the ball, shit, we got to go in and play defense to get them stopped. Or whatever it is. We have those in our life. We have them in games. You have to be able to respond to them. And, when it gets to be crunch time at the end of the game, whether it was a Tennessee game where we didn't execute well the last 5 plays of the game, or, in this game where we had a couple chances to get off the field on 3rd down on defense when we were ahead, 21-17, made mental errors that helped them. Made a mental error that helped them score in overtime. So all these things, have a cumulative effect, and they're hard to overcome, when you're playing good teams. So I love the competitive spirit on our team. We got a lot of character on our team, but we have to play with discipline and be able to play smart in critical moments in the game. I don't think it's from lack of intelligence. I think, sometimes I worry a little bit that we're trying so hard, we're a little bit over anxious, and sometimes that leads to, not playing smart. So that's something that we have to work on and people have to understand, and we have to continue to try to create the right habits. So when you get in a game like that, you're not thinking about it. You're just confident in being able to do it.
What have you learned about your quarterback the last month?
Well, he hadn't been able to practice very much, and I think that's been a little bit of a problem for us in terms of developing as a team. Bryce actually went through a whole month. He got hurt in the Arkansas game. Didn't play in the A&M game, didn't practice that week, didn't practice the next week, but played in the Tennessee game, didn't practice the next week, played in the Mississippi State game, didn't practice the next week, we had a bye week, and then he practiced before the LSU game. So I think this has sort of created a little bit of an inability to, we were playing really good on offense early in the season, but having that time where you don't have the leader of your team and the guy playing quarterback who actually the offense was really kind of built around. It sort of impeded our progress a little bit. And now we have to get it back. We have to get the momentum back. We have to get the confidence back. We have to get the continuity back in the passing game. We got to be able to create more balance by running the football better. So there's a lot of things we need to improve on, but this has been a little bit of a work in progress for us, as we've tried to get through this, how we've had to manage Bryce through this last month.
Coach, we got the first question already from Mark. It was brought to us by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig. To know what's below, call 811 or visit al811.com. But the first call of the night from the Yellowhammer Brewing Hotline, as always, comes from Pee Wee down in Grand Bay. Go ahead, Pee Wee.
Yeah, Pee Wee.
Hey, Coach, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Pee Wee. How are you?
I am doing well. Coach, what I wanted to ask about was the team communication, whether it's the offensive line calling a blocking scheme, getting us into the right blitz coverage, everybody on the same page as far as that coverage, or whether it's communication between the quarterback and the receivers to make sure that they're on the same page, or our defensive guys. How is the communication throughout the game, and has that maybe been an issue for us? And if so, has it been a little bit of an emphasis to
yeah, well, I don't think the communication, like on offense, we had too many penalties in the game, some of them a couple pre-snap penalties. That's all about communication. That's all about managing noise. But, there was one play on the goal line, where we got the wrong line call. I think it was 2nd and 4 at the 5-yard line or whatever, and we kind of got stopped for no gain because the right side of the line didn't block, exactly like we're supposed to. So that was down on, their end. So we had a miscommunication. But, it's not miscommunication when you block the right guys and they shrink the pocket on the quarterback. All right, so he has a hard time seeing because we don't have a firm enough pocket. That isn't lack of communication. That's lack of execution in what you're doing to block. The mental errors on defense, a couple of them that we had, they were truly mental errors. Guys make calls. Guys have to respond to the call. If you say Lucky and the guy goes Ringo, is that lack of communication? It's lack of execution. All right, so, I don't really agree with, we harp on communication all the time. It wasn't a lack of communication on the first play of overtime. We busted the rotation in the coverage, but everybody in the secondary did it, and it was not right, which made us short when a quarterback pulled the ball. All right, so it was a mental error. Was it miscommunication? It was a mental error. All right, so we have to do a better job of not making those kind of errors so that we can execute in the game. I really can't say we're always harping on communication, but, Bryce is one of the best guys that I've ever been around, pro or college, when it comes to understanding the defense and making the calls to get people picked up on the blitz. Whether we have to go solid, whether we have to go 5-0, whether we have to rope or lasso or whatever it is to get the protection right, because he has as good an understanding of what the defense is trying to do as the coaches in terms of where they can blitz, where their numbers are, who's covering who, and he helps the offensive line tremendously. I mean, so we don't have an issue in that. We have an issue in execution. Fundamental technical execution of doing things and responding the right way to the communication so that we can play better together as a team. You can't have one guy on one play messes up. All right, that may be the difference in the game. All right, so you can't just think it's okay to have a my bad. Everybody messes up and they say my bad, like it's okay, like I admitted that I messed up. Well, if everybody has a my bad, we got no chance to win. You can't have a my bad. I can't have them either.
My bad. 877-202-BAMA is the number to call if you'd like to be a part of the Yellowhammer Brewing Hotline. And join us here on the Nick Saban Show. We're back after this on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. Bama 0 for 3 on third downs. Play clock down to 3 as Young gets the snap, dumps it off. Catch made McClellan. A lot of running room. 45 across midfield. Foot race. 35, 30, 25, 20, and he is brought down near the 10-yard line of LSU. 64 yards. McClellan on the drag, and then the burst, and Bama's knocking on the door. Another refreshing Bama highlight presented by Yellowhammer Brewing Company, brewed locally in Alabama and served to fans across the Southeast. Chris Stewart back with you here on the Nick Saban show. Mark Schlabach from ESPN is the media guest, brought to us by CB&S Bank. Coach Nick Saban here as well. And, Coach, we've got our first question on the AL.com thread from the Nick Saban Show. It's from Rusty in Franklin, Tennessee. And he says, hey, Coach, Ole Miss currently leads the SEC in rushing by a large margin. What makes them so difficult to stop for a defense?
Well, they do a lot of multiples in formations, a lot of motions, and, this new age of, we talked about it last week, LSU actually did it in the game too with the kind of quarterback who can do it. Where you run like zone plays and the tight end comes across and he avoids and goes in the flat, the quarterback pulls the ball and he can throw it to him or he can run it. I mean, it's like triple option. So it actually makes one less guy playing in the box. All right, and they're pretty good at doing it, and they actually crack the guy, who covers the guy a lot of the times. So now you got to crack your place, on the perimeter. But that makes people be able to run the ball downhill. And that's one of the things that early in the season we were doing a little better than we're doing right now. I mean, I think losing Justin Aboigbe was, a big loss for us because he was an experienced player and a very good defensive lineman, allowed us to roll more players, inside. But, we need to stop the run better so we can create, more positive situations for us defensively, down and distance-wise. That gives you more multiples of things that you can do. And they have done a really, really good job of running the ball. They got really good backs. Their offensive line plays really well. Their quarterback does a good job in terms of taking shots off of play-action passes, so it really keeps you honest in the back end. These guys are a really good offensive team. I think everybody knows Lane's a really, really good offensive coach, and it reflects in the way they play and the way they execute and the way they can run the ball, and their statistics show it.
Coach, let's go back to the phones. The Yellowhammer Brewing Hotline. Tommy is next in Leeds. Go ahead, Tommy, with Coach Saban.
How you doing, Coach?
Doing good, Tommy. How are you?
I'm doing okay, Coach. I had a question to ask. I know I shouldn't be asking this. How's the defense going to react to the Ole Miss offense this week?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, we got to play with a lot of discipline. Everybody's got to play together as a unit. Everybody's got to play responsibility football. It's a really difficult preparation because it's so the pace of play in terms of how fast they play on offense and how that gets defensive players sort of out of their routine, of getting a call, getting lined up, seeing the formation, because they're going to go fast. I mean, sometimes there's only 7 or 8 seconds since the ball was spotted, and they're snapping the ball and going to the next play. And, it's a little bit like Tennessee. They get on a roll, and they just keep going fast. And the defensive players have to be able to execute. it can't lead to mental errors, guys not getting the calls, guys not getting lined up, not being able to play their responsibility, because that's when you have breakout plays. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to do really, really well. The other thing these guys do is, they go for it on 4th down a lot. So, if it's 3rd and 5, that's like 2nd and 5 to them because they're going to go for it on 4th down. So, and if you're not stopping the run and doing a really good job up front, you get yourself in a lot of, difficult down and distance situations. I mean, last year we had about 10 3rd and 3 or lesses in the game. All right, so, you really got to do a great job of stopping the run and the explosive plays. And I think those two things are a combination that helps them become a really good running team because of their play action passes as well.
How much have they changed under Charlie Weiss Jr. at all?
From last year to this year, I don't think a whole bunch. Maybe there's a few more wrinkles in terms of formation multiples, but not plays. But the thing that they do is they'll do something different in every game. So the cumulative effect of all the things that they do, you got to try to expose your players to all those things during the course of the week, so it makes a lot of it, a lot to prepare for. But you may not even see it in your game, and you may see something completely different. So I think that's always a challenge. You got a lot of things to work on. So the things that they do extremely well that you really have to stop, you really have less time to work on.
Coach, we've got a question, I believe, from a young man down here. Just to our right. Go ahead, buddy. Say your name and give Coach your question.
Yeah.
What's your name, buddy?
Ezra.
Oh, yeah? How you doing?
Good.
All right, man.
My name's Ezra Warren, and I just finished my first year of flag football. Can you stay long enough so one day I can play on your team?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll do that.
Please.
Yeah, we'll do that. So let me ask you a question. How old are you?
6.5.
6.5. And you're playing what position in flag football?
Quarterback.
Quarterback. So you can pass it pretty good?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Well, I tell you what, when you get to be 8 or 9, you need to come to our camp. All right, and we have a camp for little kids, and the coaches do a really good job. There's always a lot of quarterbacks there, but it's really, really good for your development. And I'm glad that you're interested in the game, and I'm glad that you're a fan of Alabama, and I'm glad and really honored in a way that you would want to come and be a part of our program. So thank you. We appreciate that.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, buddy.
Roll Tide. Coach, we've talked about that before, but that is got a nice note for you there that the young man's made. That's fantastic.
Good.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. All right.
That's great.
Thank you.
Coach, when you get a chance to work with little ones, that's something that you really do. You're hands-on in camp and have a chance to work with them and develop them a little bit.
Yeah, I enjoy it, though. I think that's one of the things that I enjoy most about coaching is, actually the grind of getting ready to play the games, the grind of coaching. I mean, I like practice. I like teaching on the field. I like teaching in the meetings. So I don't like walking around, like even during camp, bored to death watching people do things, and you're just, what are you accomplishing? Right. You can't have a happy life if you don't have a meaningful life. All right, so to do something meaningful, all right, that is helpful to somebody is, I don't know, it's kind of self-fulfilling to me.
It's awesome.
Speaking of youth, what was it like to work with Lane Kiffin?
I like working with Lane. Lane is a great play caller and, really, really great imagination, really good on game day in terms of, could see what the other team's doing and how they were playing plays and immediately knew how to try to take advantage of it. Great play caller. And so, he did a really good job for us. I mean, and he's done a really good job there. I mean, they won a lot of games and their teams play really, really well. And I think he always does a really good job of utilizing the personnel he has, putting them in the right place. And one of their tight ends got hurt, so they they played 4 wideouts in one game and did all the same stuff with the wideout that they do with the tight end. And so, very innovative when it comes to how to utilize players, but not making it so difficult for the other players on the team when he makes changes.
Coach, let's go back to the phones. Jimmy and Hoover, you're next up for Coach.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, Coach, how are you?
Good, buddy.
I want to ask you a question. I'm obviously a big-time fan. I've watched you over the years, and there seems like this year you seem to be a little calmer on the sidelines. You just, and even in the press conferences, sometimes it may warrant for you to get a little upset. But is there anything that you've done particularly to stay calmer this year? I mean, it could be a big help to me. I get on the interstate and I immediately blow up. So I was just wondering what you may have done this year to stay calmer.
Wow. I usually, one of my first prayers in church on Sunday is to pray that I don't get mad, because a lot of times when I get mad, I do things that I wish I wouldn't have done. I say things that I wish I wouldn't have said, and I don't make really good decisions and choices. So this has been a lifelong sort of goal to, not get too emotional, not get too upset. I think that sometimes it's the kind of team you have. Some guys really need you to get on them. Some guys get really, they get a little upset maybe and don't respond very well when you get on them. It bothers them a lot, makes them think that they're not pleasing you. So I think, the personality of the players, I get on some players, other players I don't. I do it in practice maybe a little bit more. But I found that players respond better to teaching and showing them what they did wrong than they do actually just like yelling and screaming. I mean, I don't think that does a lot of good. So we try to teach guys, and I go over the bench a lot of times, just say something to a guy about something they did or didn't do, and maybe try to make a correction. But, one of the things that I found most impactful with players is when they do something wrong, actually just take them in a room by themselves and show them on the film that, here's 5 plays that you're doing this, and you really should be doing it this way. And if you did it this way, it would help you a lot more. And even sometimes when you do it in a group setting, it doesn't have the same impact. So, I think, young people are pretty self-absorbed. They kind of, how does things affect me? And I think you got to kind of change your teaching to show them how things affect them. And maybe sometimes they don't get that, in a team meeting, or they don't get that in a group meeting on offense or defense. But one-on-one, they get it a lot better. So if you think me acting up on the sidelines and breaking headsets is going to help us play better, I'll sure as hell do it, because
He's just opened up a can of worms for all of us on that one, Coach. We'll take a break. We'll come back, and we'll have more of the Nick Saban Show here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Gets the snap at 2. Pressure coming up the middle. Steps up in the pocket. Being corralled. Breaks away. Throws downfield. Has a man. Catch made. Touchdown, Alabama. 41 yards. No flags. Houdini escapes again.
This segment of the Nick Saban Show is brought to you by Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. With zero sugar and refreshingly delicious, is Coca-Cola Zero Sugar the best Coke ever? We'll find out for yourself. I'm Chris Stewart, filling in again for Eli Gold. Mark Schlabach of ESPN and ESPN.com is our media guest, courtesy of CB&S Bank, alongside head coach Nick Saban here at Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Tuscaloosa. We'll go back to the phones in just a moment, but got a question from Coach in a moment. But we just also had some gentlemen in uniform that were here, Coach, and I know how much respect you have for our military, as we all do, but a chance to visit with those young men, pretty special as well.
Yeah, well, I was just telling them that a couple guys from Louisiana, one was the long snapper on our national championship team there in 2003. He's been in the military for 15 years, was here today to speak to our ROTC group here in Alabama. So he stopped by to say hello. And he was telling me about all these crazy things because he's a pilot that he's done in the military over the last 15 years, the missions that he's flown on and all the bad things. And then he says, but the one that was the scariest moment in my life was with 9 seconds to go in the national championship team, we had to punt in a national championship game. We played Oklahoma.
Sure.
And he said, none of the experience that I've had in war or in an airplane or flying all these missions was as scary as making that snap.
I bet.
I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Well, he was only having to deal with the enemy, Coach. He'd have had to deal with you if he'd messed that snap up. There's a difference.
I don't know.
Let me ask you this. You worked, you talked about it many times, working in your dad's filling station for quite a while. You coached for much longer. But to bring that analogy, how tough is it to change a tire while the car's still moving, or maybe in the case of right now, just tighten a loose lug nut here and there?
Well, my worst experience at my dad's service station, if that's what you're asking me, was it didn't snow a whole lot in West Virginia, but we lived at the bottom of Swisher's Hill, which anybody in Alabama would say that's a mountain. All right, so people would have to put their chains on to get over the mountain, or they'd have to put them on our side of the mountain to get over the mountain. So when there's snow on the ground, people here don't even know what it's like to put chains on. You have to lay down in the snow, all right, and hook them with your cold hands, all right, these hooks. All right, so we would put them on. People come over the mountain, you take them off.
Wow.
So, like shaking the tree, boss, like Cool Hand Luke used to say.
Right.
Taking them off, boss. Putting them on, boss. But that was my worst memory of working in my dad's service station, is when it would snow and we would have to do that. It was awful. Your hands are froze, you're all wet. But, for $1 an hour, it was worth it.
So coaching-wise, how tough is it to get those things tightened up that you need to while it's moving, while everything's going?
Well, I think the hardest thing about coaching now is not really any of those things, but it's trying to maintain the culture of you have to have like relentless discontent. And I've talked about this before, I think, where you're never really satisfied. You're never really relieved that you played well or that you had a good game. That when you start all over, you have this relentless discontent to try to get better, to try to improve, to try to take all the things that you could learn from in the last game to get better the next game. Because, relief syndrome is, it's the enemy of being successful. When you get satisfied, you're not going to continue to do the things to be successful. So I don't care if you're in business. I don't care if it's being a good person. Always trying to do it better, I call it relentless discontent. I'm never really satisfied. I'm always trying to do better. And I actually think that sometimes maybe, we always try to reinforce positive and catching guys doing it right. All right, but I'm kind of this way with our team. Whether we win or whether we lose, there's always learning opportunities. And when the players are humiliated, they're always more apt to receive those things when something bad happens than they are when you have success, because they're relieved and they're looking at you like, Coach, we won the game. And you're telling us we had too many penalties, we had too many turnovers, we did this wrong, we did that wrong, we need to improve on this and that and all that. But I'm trying to create that relentless discontent, because there's lessons to be learned whether you have success or you don't have success if you are a perfectionist and you want to be as good as you can be. And you want to create value for yourself and value for your future. Well, the way you do that is you play well and you play the best that you can. So having this attitude of never being satisfied, I call it relentless discontent. That's the hardest thing to me in this culture, to try to create and maintain with our players and the people in our organization from top to bottom.
Coach, let's go back to the audience. And I think we got another question here from a gentleman.
Sure. Hey, Coach. Pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for taking my question. I lead with my wife, kids, and family, and I. We're down here in Tuscaloosa for 8 weeks for work purposes, but a big reason we're here is because of what you created at Alabama. It's been a great pleasure to watch you guys from a distance where we're from in Connecticut. But my question is, we hear a lot about the main folks on your team, in the media anyway, Bryce and Will, of course, but curious to understand, is there anyone, maybe it's just on the practice field or in the game over the last couple of weeks, who have really stepped up and done the things that they're supposed to do in your eyes that maybe we don't hear about as much, but that you would advise that we keep our eye on as the season comes to an end over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I think we have, quite a few players who are sort of, I don't know if you'd want to call them unsung heroes, guys that really play with a lot of consistency that don't get a lot of credit. Like, Byron Young, as a defensive lineman. He made a couple sacks last week. Nobody talks a lot about him. Guy always in the right place, always plays hard, plays hurt. You have to have a lot of respect for, just how he competes in the game. Dallas Turner's another guy like that, and, you hear about Will all the time, but Dallas is really, really good. Henry Toto just makes every call on defense. He's a great leader. He makes everybody better. Jordan Battle gets accolades because he is a good player, but DeMarco is, a really good player, and he's actually been the point production leader on defense the last 2 weeks in a row. Most people don't, talk a lot about that. In the offensive line, these guys are probably the most unsung heroes of all. All right, because every play in the game, somebody's lining up 2 feet across from them, all right, and they're going to butt them in the throat one way or the other, or they're going to get butted in the throat one way or the other, all right, and it just goes on and on and on and on. So to be a relentless sort of competitor to try to win your one-on-one matchups in those situations, which is different than being a wide receiver where you run off the ball, nobody really hits you, you try to beat the guy one-on-one, but it's not as physically taxing from a contact standpoint. So, and I know our offensive line has gotten a little bit criticized this year, but, I really think that those guys have worked hard. We got to play a little more physical. We got to get a little more movement, and there's some things that they can do better, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for how those guys compete and play in the game. And some of the younger receivers on our team have made a lot of progress, but haven't had quite as much opportunity. Some of them are playing on special teams. Kendrick Law is, going to be a really good player, number 19. He's been a good player on special teams. I'd like to get him more opportunities. Isaiah Bond has, done really well as a freshman. One of the guys, Ja'Cory Brooks, he's probably one of the best all-around competitors, best special teams player. You always talk about how many passes they catch. But watch this guy play on special teams. He blocks punts. He's one of the best guys on punt return, special teams, whatever you want to. To me, those kinds of guys, your character kind of gets evaluated by what you do when nobody else is watching. And a lot of times football players are evaluated by the things that people don't really watch, because everybody watches the ball. In football, everybody watches the ball. Nobody watches the line play. If you throw the ball, they just watch the ball. They see if the guy caught it. The guy catches a lot, he gets a lot of accolades. But if he plays on special teams and is the best blocker and all that, nobody ever talks about him. But I will say this. I love our team. I hate it that our team has struggled in certain circumstances this year. And, I'm kind of responsible for that. And I think that, too many penalties, not an inability to sort of play their best when their best is needed. And I really feel like it's not lack of intelligence. I don't even think it's lack of discipline. I think they want to do it so bad, they create too much anxiety sometimes, and they make poor choices and decisions. And I hate that, because I'm not an outcome-oriented person. I'm a process-oriented person, and all we preach to our players is to be focused on the next play. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't look at the scoreboard. All those things. But there's so much pressure on these guys based on expectations all right, that people create for them, not individually and collectively for our team. And they've got people telling them, what about the draft? What about this? What about that? All right, so everything is about outcome. All right, but your ability to focus on the process of what you have to do to get the outcome is what is going to create that value for the future, but it makes it really, really hard, all right, to focus on that when you have all these external factors creating these expectations for you individually and collectively as a team.
So the SEC formed a working group about keeping people off the field. What can you do about it?
Win. If we win, they don't do it. And they don't do it at other games. They only do it when they beat us. So if we just win, then we wouldn't have a problem. Don't you think?
Good answer.
Pretty simple explanation there. We'll come back. We'll have more with Coach Nick Saban in just a moment on the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Bryce waiting on the snap, gets it. Pressure coming from the edge, throws a fade left side. Earl dives. Did he make the catch? Yes, he did. What a grab. JoJo Earl inside the 30. They spot him at the 28. The bank first down. Alabama's got it 1st and 10. 48 seconds and ticking time left.
Welcome back, everybody. Great to have you with us here for more of the Nick Saban Show. Our media guest, Mark Schlabach of ESPN. We'll have final question from him in just a moment. But before we do, Coach, our second question from the Nick Saban Show thread at AL.com is from Allison up in Fort Payne, Alabama. Allison says, hey, Coach, can you comment on the evolution of our offense during Lane Kiffin's time at Alabama? Thank you, Coach, for all that you do in Roll Tide.
Yeah, well, we talked about that earlier, but, I think that we changed philosophies totally, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to hire Lane. He had really never done this stuff prior to coming here. All right, but when I met with him about coming here, I told him, I said, we got to change, we got to study, and we got to figure out all these RPOs and all this spread offense and these motions and all these things that we do. And Lane is a really smart guy, so he was a good guy to sort of dive into this. All right, and, we gradually changed and grew in this offense, studied other people, and that was the evolution of where we are. Now, I think last year and this year we've kind of gone more even to the drop-back passing, which I would, but that's because of Bryce. But I think in the future, we'll get back to more of the conventional spread, run the ball, have more balance, RPOs, that type of thing. So what we've done now is to, sort of fit what Bryce does best.
Coach, Will Anderson, probably 3 or 4 games left, projected #1 pick. What are NFL franchises going to like most about him?
Well, I don't think you're going to find a better person. I don't think you're going to find a better competitor. I don't think you're going to find a guy that's going to play harder with better competitive character. And, we talk about a lot of things about pride and performance and relentless discontent and all the things that you look for guys that are always trying to be the best that they can be. This guy's got them all, and he's a good leader. He affects everyone around him, all right, with the example that he sets, the intensity that he plays with. And the guy's got ability. He's a big guy. He's got speed. He can turn speed to power and pass rush. He can play with power on the line of scrimmage. He uses his hands well, and he's a smart guy. He's a smart guy, and you can't ask for a better person to represent your organization wherever you are. He's done. You're talking about class. You're talking about a class family. I can't say enough good things about who Will Anderson is as a person and what kind of player he is.
A lot of times, Coach, it seems like guys have even more success at the next level than they do in college because they may not be able to double team certain players defensively. Obviously you speak infinitely better to that than I could, but I would think that's where he's going to have a chance to flourish even more at the next level.
Well, he's going to be a significant player wherever he plays. He's a significant player for us, and even though people have done multiple things to try to stop, what he does best, I think it helps other players play better, and I still think he has a huge impact on the game, and I wouldn't trade him for anything.
Understand. Coach, We always love to get the final word from you, and that final word is presented each week by Mercedes-Benz.
You know, sometimes we can't win all of our fights in life, but we got to fight all the fights. And I think, you know, our players are going to be evaluated, you know, very critically in terms of how they respond. You respond with your ability. We have ability on our team. We got to respond with the right kind of character and attitude. It's going to be another tough test for us. But, you know, like I said earlier, adversity creates opportunity, but you got to have the right mindset to take advantage of it. And the legacy of this team is going to be determined to a large degree by how they finish, because people will respect the way they respond to the adversity with their ability to go play with focus and do the things the way we need to do it. So that's what we're trying to develop on our team. That's what we need. You know, I'd like for our fans to do the same thing. You know, I'd like for, you know, our fans to you know, think about building, not tearing down. Think about being positive. Think about being supportive. Think about coming and support the team in every way that you can. These players have worked hard. I love these players. We haven't gotten the results that we wanted to get, but nobody feels worse about it than they do. Nobody tries harder than they do, and I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for what they've done, and I take full responsibility for what we haven't been able to get done. So hopefully we'll be able to do a better job and play our best game of the season, you know, this week over at Ole Miss.
We look forward to it. We always appreciate you and your time, Coach. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, and I thank Mark for doing this. Thank you so much, buddy. Appreciate you.
Coach Nick Saban, folks, his final word presented by Mercedes-Benz. Hey, Coach, and the Nick Saban Show are presented by Alpha Insurance. Protect your cars, home life, and business with Alpha. Get a quote or find a local agent at alphainsurance.com.